The Chargers lost a really tough game last night to the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday Night Football, 27-24. Now, with all of that being said, there was a lot of things that were very questionable about last night's game, and I don't want to dive too much into that because the fact is you can't change anything that did occur, and although there was maybe some potentially bad calls, I really want to go through the 5 things that we learned about the Chargers after Chargers Week 2 game against the Kansas City Chiefs. So if this is something that you enjoy, please give me a like and subscribe. Truly means the world to me. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I cannot do that without your guys' help. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into this. The 5 things we learned about the Chargers in Week 2 versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, before we dive into this real quick note here. Something I'm going to be adding new to my channel is weekly after the Chargers game, I'm going to be doing my 5 things we learned video, as you're seeing right now, as well as what you will likely see tomorrow or Sunday, depending on how it works out. I'm also going to be doing a film recap of each game, so I'm going to go through, find the biggest turning points, questionable plays, bad play calling, flags that overturned, all that stuff, compile that into a video, and I'm going to walk through play by play with you guys on that, so expect to see that in the coming days, as well as every following week that the Chargers do play. But let's get right into this. The first thing that we learned about the Chargers is going to be pertaining to Justin Herbert and the fact that he is the real deal, and this man is a soldier. Now, not only was Justin Herbert playing stellar, having 334 yards, 3 touchdowns on a 69 completion percentage, and 1 interception. You can't leave that out. But 69% completion percentage is absolutely crazy. If you're at about 70, throughout a whole year, and I know this is one game, but throughout a whole year, you are at MVP candidacy, and that just really shows how well he did play in last night's game, as well as 334 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I think a big factor that we kind of all overlook is Justin Herbert's awareness when he is in the pocket. Just by having his awareness, he found a way to get out of multiple sacks. I mean, whether it was just stepping up in the pocket, just give enough time for your line to get that block back engaged, or just completely exiting the pocket, running, finding space that the defenders have to come up, so now you have an opening in the passing. He was so great at finding room within his area to throw the ball and preventing sacks throughout the entirety of the game. Even in the second half, when you had Corey Linsley and Trey Pipkins go down with injuries, he was still doing an exceptionally good job at preventing multiple sacks from occurring, even with all the pressure that he had against him. He also, once again, kept a very open offense, completing passes to 8 different players. Running backs, tight ends, receivers, it didn't matter who it was. Justin Herbert was going to find somebody open. He didn't care what your name was. If you were open and he thought you could make the catch, he was going to throw it to you. Mike Williams also was put in an exceptionally good position because of Justin Herbert and his ability to make passes. Now, as we all know, Mike Williams is extremely good in the 50-50 ball, or for Mike Williams, the 80-20 ball, which is in a position where you throw the ball to where it's going to be a 50% chance of him catching it or the defender knocking it down / catching it himself. And Mike Williams has done so good at that. And last night's game, we really saw it. I think Justin Herbert and his ability to put it in a spot that only Mike Williams can catch it just really improved the ability for Mike Williams to have a great game, having over 100 yards, having, I think, 8 receptions. Now, something we're going to talk about a little bit later, it was kind of sad to see that Mike Williams practically disappeared in that second half, but we're going to touch on that in a little bit here. Even with all that being said, the biggest thing that we saw last night was Herbert's ability to, just be an absolute soldier and leave everything out on the field. After potentially breaking his ribs on some pressure in which he was hit after his throw, and he would land on the defender's helmet, and he looked like he was in severe pain, and a lot of people speculating that he broke a rib. He was back in after only missing 1 play. Seriously, 1 play in a case that he could have broke multiple ribs. Justin Herbert was back out there. Not only that, but the very next play after Herbert got back in, he had a very similar thing happen where he was hit again right in his ribs, and he was shook up, and he was in a lot of pain, and Justin Herbert got right back up, and he didn't miss a single play that second time around. I mean, he was leaving everything out there. even with this injury that would hold many different players out, he was still finding a way to perform at a top level. I mean, he was in so much pain that on 3rd and 1, with 1 yard to go and an open field in front of him where he could easily get that first down and then get down on a normal situation, he easily could. He was in so much pain that as he tried to run, he decided to throw the football into the dirt instead of getting the first down because he was in so much pain. And you know what he does in the very next play? He throws an absolute rope of a pass and would end up getting a touchdown on that very same drive on a pass to Joshua Palmer. I mean, with this injury, he was still playing at a top level. And it's just absolutely insane to think about. Now, a thing to mention here is currently we do not know what has happened to Herbert. At the point of this recording, we have not seen x-rays, which were taken right after the game. But we don't know how long he's going to be out. But with the Chargers having a long break of 10 days before the next game against the Jaguars, as well as the fact that Herbert already proved that he can play through the injury, it's likely that he will be back for week 3. But if he is not, to kind of analyze something, normally it takes about 2 to 4 weeks before you can kind of get back in the flow of things. And the Chargers, the next 2 weeks, the next 2 games are against the Jaguars and the Texans, which, if worse comes to worse, which I don't expect it to happen, I could see Chase Daniels or Easton Stick getting wins out of both of those games, but I don't expect Justin Herbert to miss much time. So with all that being said, Justin Herbert looked phenomenal yesterday, even with the one interception that he did throw that was a pick 6, but we're going to talk about that here in a little bit of time. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is going to pertain to the 2 things we kind of pushed off in Mike Williams kind of regressing that second half, as well as the interception that Herbert threw, and that's going to be some questionable play calling that is still happening. Now, after week 1 against the Raiders, there was a lot of backlash for Joe Lombardi about his passiveness in the second half, and I think, sadly, we kind of saw that happen again this week. Now, the Chargers were 5 of 16 on 3rd down, which is not something that you want to see from a team that has Super Bowl contending hopes. 5 of 16 is well below 50%, which is about where you want to be. But the fact is that a lot of these 3rd down conversions that they didn't complete were very short downs. I mean, 3rd and 1, we're talking 3rd and 2, within 4 yards, and they weren't able to complete it. And I think that does lean into some play calling and putting them in bad situations. Now, in the second half, there was a lot of injuries, and it did put Herbert in a sticky situation. But for some reason, in that second half, Justin Herbert went from 6 yards in the air per pass on average to just right at 3 yards per play of in the air passes, which means from the line of scrimmage to where the ball is caught, that's how far it is. So in the second half, Justin Herbert on average was only throwing 3 yards past the line of scrimmage each attempt. That is not something that we should be seeing out of Justin Herbert. And not only that, but in the second half, Mike Williams, who had over 100 receiving yards, a touchdown, 8 receptions, went silent. I mean, he wasn't getting targeted at all. He was getting no yards, no touchdowns, no nothing. And I think that although that the Chiefs did kind of back up into 2 high safeties to prevent some big plays from Mike Williams, and they were doubling him on a consistent amount of plays, the fact is you should, as an offense coordinator who is having a guy with a big game, be able to motion him across the field, put him in some situations where he can get some short plays and get him rolling again. But instead, they just completely went away from Mike Williams. Not only that, but in the second half, a lot of the time you might see, they moved into 2 high safety, so it's not allowing Herbert to get these longer passes. But when you watch these, and this is something that we'll see when I do my film recap, is a lot of the plays, even if it was thrown to a short down, like running back in the flats or something, pretty much every other wide receiver was running short routes. It's not like there was somebody that was going deep and the safeties were covering it. It was just completely, really short routes, which is not something you want to see. And Joe Lombardi, who came from the Saints, as we all know, working with Drew Brees, who was really good about those short downs and just letting your wide receivers go and get the yards after catch. Although that does work, the fact is when you have a guy like Justin Herbert that can get the ball anywhere, why force that when you can get medium passes, long passes consistently? Why force short downs where you have to have your players, especially when you're missing guys like Keenan Allen, force them to get yards after catch when Herbert could just get them the first down by just throwing it, and then they get extra yards as they go. A little bit of questionable there. Now, on a good side of things, the Chargers were 4 for 4 on fourth down when they decided to go for it, which is, fourth and Staley, as we all mentioned. And there were some controversial plays where people thought they should have went for it on fourth down, but 4 for 4 on fourth down is very good. Now, some other things here in this questionable play calling is the constant 3-and-outs that we saw in the second half was nothing very good to see. And I felt like the Chargers were forcing runs late in the game. This is something we're talking about a little bit later, but just so that you know, the Chargers as a whole team were averaging less than 4 yards per carry. 4 yards per carry for a running back is about average, and the whole team was averaging less than that. But still late in the game when you needed to go score and time was running out, they were still forcing runs, and that felt a little bit unnecessary and just bad play calling overall. Now, another kind of big thing, this is a bigger thing for me, and that's going to be the Justin Herbert interception that was thrown. Now, in this situation, as many of you probably saw on Twitter or even as you watch it live, they chose to keep Gerald Everett out on the field, and they would end up throwing interception right at Gerald Everett. Now, if you don't know, the Chargers would get into a goal line situation because Everett's back-to-back 7-yard reception and 26-yard reception, and on that 26-yard reception, he would get hit by multiple guys. He was so tired that he was requesting to be pulled out, but he was forced back out onto the field. And we would end up seeing them throw an interception that was a pick six because of that. And it was kind of because Gerald Everett was so exhausted that he ended up giving away his positioning to the Chiefs defense that would intercept the ball. But my kind of question here that goes back to Joe Lombardi is with, a running back room that I did mention wasn't doing well, but when it's you're 2 yards away from the goal and it's first and goal, you have 4 downs to work with because, Coach Staley's going to go for it right there. And you have Austin Eckler, who was just at a Pro Bowl level last year. You have Sony Michel, who you brought in because you're confident. Josh Quelly's been looking good. You have all these options. You don't try to run it a single time in that situation. And you're in tempo. You're hurrying up offense at that position. But you don't try to run it. It's questionable. You could run the ball twice. And if you fail both times, then you try to throw it. But instead, on first and goal, with a guy that's extremely tired, you're missing your wide receiver one. Mike Williams has been completely erased from the second half play calling. And you go for a pass in tempo, hurry up offense when guys are exhausted. And it leads to a pick six. That's a questionable call. And not only that, but there was some late game poor management, as mentioned. Now, let's mention something here. Joe Lombardi, I'm not a huge fan of what he's been doing. Tempo-wise, play calling, I think you got to let Herbert, throw the ball a little bit more than he's been able to, at least more downfield throws. But it does come down to the players at some point. Players have to convert. Players have to make plays work. But I have not been a big fan of what Joe Lombardi has done so far, and I hope to see him turn around because I think he has ran a very good offense throughout his career. Now, the next thing here is going to be missed opportunities, and that's something that we saw a lot. And although good portion sadly did come because of the refs, and I don't want to dive too much into that, but first thing we're going to cover here in this missed opportunities will be the overturned turnovers. Numerous interceptions that Patrick Mahomes threw where it was just errant passes would be overturned due to flags. And this is something that even himself talked about in the post-game interview, saying that, we kind of got lucky there with some overturned interceptions or dropped interceptions there, and got a little bit lucky. And that's something that it shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't get lucky because of these calls. Overturned turnovers. We saw Nas Adderley get an interception that would be overturned due to a penalty on the Chargers defense, even though the Chargers defender would actually be the one that was thrown on the ground. Lots of backlash on Twitter, and not only from just Chargers fans, but a lot of actual real NFL players. Derwin James would also come up with a pick six before it was overturned once again because of a flag. Early blown fumbles. Derwin James completely uprooted Travis Kelce. And although I know the rules do say that it should be blown down right away, but the fact is within 1 second of Kelce being in the air, J.C. Jackson already punched the ball out and it was a fumble, but it was overturned saying he was down. And then to the other side of things, there was some dropped interceptions and an interception that was overturned that a lot of people also think shouldn't have been overturned because of a ref's call. Asante Samuel Jr. was looking phenomenal last night. I mean, absolutely looked amazing, but he would drop a couple interceptions there. There was a very controversial one that was overturned interception where the ball, and I quote, came loose. I'm not going to be here telling you anything, but maybe you'll have some Twitter comments up here. I mean, there was a lot of people, including Richard Sherman, Des Bryant, a lot of guys out there that were saying that it was not a incompletion pass, which it was overturned from. At first it was interception, and they overturned it to an incomplete pass. And I just don't know if there was enough there to say that it was overturned. And I don't want to sit here and sound too much of like, oh, the refs screwed him over, because I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that too much, but there was some calls there that were questionable. I mean, when you have that many people, I mean, fans from every single fan base, NFL players, NFL coaches, everywhere saying that shouldn't have been overturned, and it was overturned, you know, maybe it shouldn't have been overturned if that many people are saying so. And the only people that are saying that, oh, it clearly was an interception are Chiefs fans. And I think there's something to say about that. Now, Asante Samuel would also drop another potential pick six in the end zone, and I think that's a little bit on him. We would see his father, Asante Samuel, who was an NFL player, talk about how he was dropping multiple passes in his second year in the league, and Asante Samuel in that similar situation here. Maybe he can work with his dad to get in a better situation where he can come down with these interceptions a little bit more consistently. Now, the final missed opportunity here is going to be the final kind of opportunity the Chargers had to win it, and that was a loose onside kick that, you know, the Chiefs wound up dropping the onside kick or let it bounce away, and it pretty much fell right in front of some Chargers players. But the Chiefs found a way to get on top before the Chargers did. And, you know, that's kind of a missed opportunity because it was a pretty solid onside kick for Hopkins that they just couldn't get on top of. Now, the next thing here is kind of a shorter thing. I don't know if it's something that we learned, but something that we're learning that the Chargers need to get a grasp on, because this was a thing that was a huge worry back in the day for Chargers fans such as myself, and that's injuries everywhere. Corey Linsley would miss the entirety of the second half due to an injury. I think some people were saying it was tendonitis. Shouldn't be a long-term injury if that is the situation, but I personally know that can be a thing that causes a lot of pain and just irritation. You feel like you can't move the right way. So I understand why he may have got pulled out, but there's no update on if he will or will not play in week 3. I do expect him to. Trey Pipkins got injured in the second half. Absolutely no update on what the injury was or if he'll play in week 3. As we all know, Justin Herbert had that rib injury. He had x-rays after the game. X-rays have not been released, at least at the point of recording, which is early morning today on the 16th, right before noon. I've seen nothing so far. There may be by the time this comes out. Keenan Allen also missed today's game with a hamstring injury. No news on if he's going to be playing in week 3. Isaiah Spiller missed week 1 and week 2. No update on his participation in week 3. You got 5 guys right there, 4 of them who are all starters that got really banged up within the past week or so. So a lot of injuries everywhere, which is a little bit worrisome, something you got to focus on. Now, the last thing that we learned here about the Chargers is they're struggling in the run game, and especially in this game. Now, with Austin Eckler being a top performer last year, having 20 touchdowns, plenty of yards, being right at the grass of being a Pro Bowler, he struggled heavily against the Kansas City Chiefs. Eckler would have 14 carries, which is a pretty substantial amount, but he would only get 39 yards, averaging 2.8 yards per carry. Now, if you do remember, at the top of the show, I mentioned that average running back gets about 4 yards per carry. A good running back gets about 4.5 yards per carry, and an elite level is somewhere above 5 yards per carry. And in this game, Austin Eckler had 2.8 yards per carry. Joshua Kelly on 4 carries, 22 yards, averaged a little bit over 5, which is pretty solid. Like I said, that's elite levels, but it's only one game. Sony Michel would have 4 carries for 13 yards. Justin Herbert would have 2 carries for 1 yard. But the Chargers overall would average 3.36 yards per carry. So if 4 is an average running back and the whole team is way below that at 3.36, that's something really worrisome. I mean, the Chiefs do have a pretty decent defense, and they did very well in the run defense, but that's something that you can start looking at the Chargers offense and their offensive line. I know they were losing some people, which definitely limited their ability to get yards in the running game later in the game, but 3.36 is nothing that you can just brush off and be okay with. That's terrible. But that's it. That's the 5 things that we learned. And it was an extremely tough loss last night. But the fact is, I'm very confident in what this Chargers team can do. I mean, with injuries, with overturned plays, with flags everywhere, with all of this stuff going on, Justin Herbert getting injured, playing with potentially broken ribs, the Chargers lost by 3 points to the Chiefs. The Chiefs are a team that many people are saying are the clear first or second team in the AFC, and it's a huge gap between. And the Chargers, with everything that was going on, going against a fully healthy Chiefs team outside of Trent McDuffie, lost by 3 points. I think that says a lot about this team. And we're only 2 weeks in. There's still 15 more games. The Chargers could, put everything together here and go absolutely insane. And the Chargers, I truly think, are still Super Bowl contenders. And although last night was really tough and I was very frustrated and I was just like, dang, why does this always happen to Chargers? But I'm very confident the Chargers can do something this year. But with that being said, comment down below what you guys think. Maybe not so much on if you think that those... how should I word this? I don't want to hear too much complaining about refs because it's something that we can't change. But let's have a conversation about how the actual Chargers played. If you like the play calling, if you think a guy can really take that next step, and if there's any updates on injuries, I'd love to know about it because I have not heard anything to this point yet. If you enjoy this content, please give me a like and subscribe. Truly means the world to me. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I cannot do that without your guys' help. Quick notice here, like I said, I'm going to be doing a film recap within the next few days. Please be searching out for that. That's something I'm really looking forward to, and I think that's something we can really develop. It's not something I've seen a whole lot of in the Charge community, is going through each play or some of the major plays and really diving into the rules, why things are happening, who might be mistaken here, and why it led to this situation. That's something that I want to start diving into myself. But as always, I hope it taught something today. I hope it made you smile. I hope it made you laugh. Something's really important to me. Affect someone's day in a great way, because every single day can be a great day if we all just put in the effort. And as always, you guys all be safe out there. But something deep inside